All right, so now I want to get into another story because while this is going on, the Democrats continue to absolutely fall on their sword. They continue to completely step on their pee-pee on this nonsense in everything that they do. The latest one has to do with the Texas storms, which are an absolute tragedy. If you don't know what's been happening in Texas, Texas had phenomenal tropical monsoon rains in the hill country that spurred flash flooding over the July 4th weekend. The Guadalupe River rose 27 feet in a matter of a couple of hours. You're talking inches a minute or an inch a minute or more than that. It's crazy how fast it went up. And unfortunately, there were camps near the river. One was a Christian girls camp for kindergarten, first grade, second grade that got washed away. They're basically all gone. Some of them are still missing. You've got death toll over 100 now. So we're going to dive into the story, but what the angle we're going to take, we're not going to cover the actual news. Most of you have probably heard about it. You can look at Fox, and we're not going to cover that. We're going to cover the fact that the Dems have been trying to politicize this and blame Trump for the weather. This is absolutely nuts. Before we get into this, please like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know what you think in the comments. If you'd like to support their show, you can do so by sharing this with everybody that you know. Also, please join us as a member of the Courageous Army on YouTube or on Patreon. Really appreciate you supporting the show. Now, let's dive in because you've got Dems absolutely destroying themselves because while Trump is fumbling the ball on this whole Epstein thing, the Dems are saying, hey, you know what? While you're fumbling that, hold my beer. Check this out.
Democrats have been blaming President Trump, as we said, and Doge for the deadly floods in Texas. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer calling on the Commerce Department to open an investigation to see if Doge cuts at National Weather Service stations impacted the situation. But this is how White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt responded to the claims after RAV's own Brian Glenn asked the question. Take a look.
I do think those comments are depraved and despicable, especially when so many Americans are mourning the loss of their children. The National Weather Service, as I said, did its job. Many experts, many meteorologists have said that. Many of you in the media, in all fairness, have said that as well. Unfortunately, not all. And many Democrat elected officials are trying to turn this into a political game, and it is not. This is a national tragedy, and the administration is treating it as such. We know the National Weather Service provided early and consistent warnings. They gave out timely flash flood alerts. There were record-breaking lead times in the lead up to this catastrophe. There is ongoing flood monitoring, and these offices were well staffed. In fact, one of the offices was actually overstaffed. They had more people than they need.
For more, let's bring in Missouri Congressman.
So, absolutely. So you've got the Dems. You've got Schumer actually saying, no, we need to investigate President Trump. The flash floods are President Trump's fault. President Trump controls the weather. President Trump actually caused flooding in Texas. This is utter nonsense, and it's egregious. And no, Doge cuts had nothing to do with it. We're going to get into Megyn Kelly bringing the receipts on this later on in this segment. It's going to be amazing. This is what the Dems are doing.
Alford, Congressman, you know tragedy. Missouri, my home state, we have tornadoes, we have floods. Yeah. We've had some really bad floods in Missouri. And if anything, it seems like the warnings today under the Trump administration, if they really want to push it to there, if the left really wants to make us discuss this, are better and more efficient than anything. Government as a whole is functioning better, don't you think, Congressman, under President Trump, and more accountably and more authentically, I might add, than it ever has under Democrat or really even recent Republican administrations?
Well, Dr. Gina, David, and Terrence, thanks for having me on. Yeah, it is working smoothly. It is more transparent than any administration I've ever seen in my lifetime. Look, I grew up down in the Houston area. We used to go on the Guadalupe River every summer to vacation. I know this area well. It is prone to flash flooding.
Absolutely. And it is more transparent than any other administration, the Epstein nonsense notwithstanding. So let's dive into this because there's that. There's Schumer and the rest of the Dems trying to blame the Republicans. Now check this out because I want to play another clip and then we're going to get into Megyn Kelly. But this is absolutely egregious by the Dems. This is how utterly tone deaf they are. You've got 100 dead, most of them children. And you've got actual Democrats blaming Republicans. You've got people on Twitter and X, and I'm not going to show posts, saying that, Texas got what they deserved. Texas voted for Trump. Texas voted for Doge. They got what they deserve. You deserve it. We actually had a a media person here in Texas who essentially called, said that the racist girls camp got what it deserved. She got fired on the spot, thankfully. But check this out.
Ridiculous how much finger pointing goes on. Something I wouldn't do. I would blame bad policies and bad reaction more than anything. Bad reaction to the aftermath of an event. Sir, thank you for being here. What do you make of these people just pointing fingers at anyone and everyone, especially the president?
100% blaming Trump for this is the most ridiculous thing. You know, after Hurricane Helene, Joe Biden's administration was the most pitiful response time. And if you remember, after Trump got in, those poor people up in North Carolina, Trump made the Army Corps of Engineers go back up there, and they finally got things working up there again. But yeah, blaming this on Trump is the most pathetic thing that you can imagine. Schumer's grabbing at straws. I saw an editorial this weekend that the Democrats, and this is a left-wing publication, was saying they better jump. They better abandon Schumer. He is a lost cause, and he's hurting the party. And AOC probably is the future of the Democratic Party, which tells you they're Marxist. I mean,
AOC is the future of the party is going to be even worse. AOC's out there doing the same nonsense. Now, I'm going to set a few things straight. There are two things that contributed to this issue. And it was not understaffing. Absolutely not. We're going to get into Megyn Kelly from that. And we're going to get into something else that Megyn Kelly discusses. And that is the fact that you've got two issues. You had all the warnings issued. You had overstaffing. You had overtime people. You had everybody that you needed. They issued the warnings. The problem was everything was in the middle of the night. That coupled with warning fatigue, warning overload that you get from the National Weather Service because they warn about everything because they're never going to not issue a warning because they don't want to be liable. So you get a whole bunch of warnings that never, ever amount to anything. So it becomes noise. And you get that in the middle of the night, and that's what you have an issue when this river rose that fast. Now, you could say that there were, maybe in something like a girls' camp like this, you should have had somebody listening to weather radio. You should have hired somebody or staffed it to listen. That's on the camp. That's not on Trump. It's not on the administration. But check this out for Megyn Kelly, who goes in and talks about all of this and why this is such an egregious argument. Check this out.
Totally agree. Just look, if there were clear evidence, if it emerged immediately thereafter that the local National Weather Service guys were understaffed, they only had one guy on duty where they used to have 10, and that guy couldn't handle it, and that's what, okay, we would deal with that. We would deal with that after we had a moment to mourn the loss of these innocents. However, the information is exactly the opposite. What we know now is that the National Weather Service, I'm just going to walk you through it, provided over 12 hours of advance notice via the flood watch and over 3 hours of lead time for flash flood warnings with escalated alerts as the storm intensified. The main problem seems to have been it all happened overnight, and most people were asleep and really not paying that close attention. And I've heard some locals down there say something which rings very true, which is there's also flash flood fatigue, warning fatigue. And you get this in any area that is, Tornado Alley down in, I think it's in Oklahoma, that particular area, or places where they have, lots of warnings when there's big storms in the winter, whatever. People get used to them and they're like, I'm not leaving. I'm not evacuating. I'm sick of these big warnings. It happens in Florida with the hurricanes. And there's probably a fair amount of people in this region who get flash flood warnings a lot and are like, because maybe they're overused. I don't know, because that can happen too, where you're like, they're just covering their own butts. It's not real. And I'm not evacuating, my family or a whole camp of youngsters for this. But you do that at your risk and at the risk of the people.
Yeah.
On July 3rd, that's Thursday, for Kerrville and surrounding areas, which is the relevant area. 1:18 p.m. on July 3rd, that's Thursday, they issued a flood watch for Kerr County, effective through Friday. 6:22 p.m., July 3rd, National Weather Center warns of considerable flooding risks north and west of San Antonio, including Kerrville. 11:41 p.m. now it's about to start really happening. Thursday night into Friday, July 3rd. First flash flood warning issued for Bandera County, which is right next to. 1:14 a.m. Now we're on July 4th, the wee hours. Flash flood warning with considerable tag issued for Bandera and Kerr counties, triggering wireless emergency alerts and NOAA weather radio notifications. Now, a lot of the phones didn't have service. I guess historically in this area, it's tough to get cell phone service. So the locals who really do care will get a NOAA NOAA weather radio, and that stuff works. But query who was listening to their NOAA weather radio that night as they went to bed. I would argue, look, I don't know what happened at Camp Mystic, but I would argue they had an obligation to have that radio, to have somebody awake and to have somebody listening. And I'm sorry, I know I've only heard lovely things about the people who ran the camp, but those 8-year-old girls should have been removed from that obviously endangered cabin when there was the first notification and moved to higher ground. I realize hindsight is 2020.
So all of the staffing was there. They were overstaffed. They had brought in overtime people. All of the warnings and alerts were issued. This is not on the Trump administration whatsoever. It has nothing to do with Doge. This is Democrats absolutely be clowning themselves again, showing us who they really are, how disgusting and evil they really are. They will use anything to try to stab at the Republicans, at the other party. They are so beholden to and addicted to power and to destroying the United States, they will do anything. So do not for an instant believe anything that the propaganda media says about, the Trump administration and Doge cuts are responsible for this. Was absolutely wrong. This is a tragedy. And Trump, to his credit, has got FEMA. He's got federal assets down there immediately helping out what Texas is doing in terms of recovery and rescue efforts. But we'll keep all of Central Texas in our prayers, especially those that have lost somebody who still don't know, because there's still people missing. But I really appreciate everybody rolling up. Thanks everybody for being here. Thanks so much. You guys are amazing. Please consider joining us. Alex, thanks so much for being here. Please consider joining us as a member of the Courageous Army on YouTube or on Patreon. And please join us again tomorrow. We will be here. Remember that God is good and he is sovereign. It'll all be good in the end. Until I catch you next time.